Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a world lit only by firelight and ambition, to the very beginnings of George Washington. We're going to step into the damp, fertile soil of colonial Virginia, long before the powdered wig and the presidential portrait, to a time when a young boy looked out at a landscape of immense possibility and equally immense danger. The air is thick with the scent of wet earth, wood smoke, and the salty tang of the tidewater, a place where fortunes were built on tobacco, and the lives of men could be cut brutally short, given the life expectancy, the complete lack of antibiotics, and a diet that could be charitably described as beige. You probably won't survive this journey to see him become president, but we'll give it a valiant go. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As always, I love seeing where you're all listening from, so feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sound that greets you isn't a city's hum, but the gentle lapping of water against a muddy shore and the distant, mournful cry of a loon across the creek. It's a cool evening in the 1730s, and the darkness out here is absolute, punctuated only by the pinpricks of stars and the warm, flickering glow from the window of a modest wooden house. This is the world you find yourself in, the world of Pope's Creek in Westmoreland County, Virginia. You can feel the humidity still clinging to the air, a remnant of the day's oppressive heat. You draw your rough-spun cloak a little tighter. Inside that home, a family is settling in for the night, their movements dictated by the setting of the sun. There's no central heating, of course. Your only source of warmth is a hearth that's doing its level best to warm the room, while also trying to fill it with a fine layer of smoke. It's a colonial 2-for-1 deal. This is the very place where, on a chilly day, February 22nd, 1732, a baby boy named George was born to Augustine and Mary Ball Washington. That fact is set in stone, a cornerstone of American history. But the boy himself, in these early years, is more myth than man, a figure pieced together from family lore and the faintest of historical records. You are here before the legend. Before the cherry tree incident, a story that was, by the way, invented by a bookseller named Parson Weems long after Washington's death to sell books. The reality is far more grounded and far more uncertain. You are a child of this landscape. Your feet know the feeling of the slick clay soil after a rainstorm, the sharp prickle of dried tobacco leaves, and the cool grass of the meadows stretching down to the river. Your father, Augustine, is a man on the move, a third-generation Virginian landowner with an insatiable appetite for acquiring more. He's a justice of the county court and a church warden, a man of standing in this small, hierarchical world. He is a planter, his wealth and status intrinsically tied to the land he owns and, crucially, to the enslaved people who work it. This is a truth that hangs in the air as surely as the humidity. The prosperity of this world, the very fabric of its society, is woven with the thread of human bondage. Your mother, Mary Ball Washington, is a formidable figure, an orphan who inherited property. She is devout, resilient, and famously stern. She is a woman who could probably find fault in a perfect summer's day, a trait that historians suggest would forge an incredible resilience in her eldest son, or at least an exceptional talent for knowing when to be quiet and simply leave the room. She instills in you a sense of duty, a deep-seated piety, and a relentless drive. While your father dreams of iron furnaces and expanding his claims westward, your mother's world is one of domestic management, faith, and the immediate, tangible reality of running a household and raising children in a world where death is a constant, unwelcome guest. When you are just 3 years old, your family moves. The world of Pope's Creek, with its view of the Potomac, is traded for a different property, Little Hunting Creek, which would one day be renamed and become famous throughout the world. But for now, it is just another farm, another temporary home. Here, your world is dominated by your older half-brother, Lawrence. He is 14 years your senior, sophisticated and worldly. He has been educated in England, and when he returns, he carries with him the air of another, grander world. He is everything you are not: polished, educated, and connected. He serves with distinction in the British military, and you listen, wide-eyed, to his stories of campaigns in the Caribbean. He is your first hero, your first window into a life of honor, duty, and gentlemanly status beyond the confines of a Virginia farm. Then, another move, this time to Ferry Farm, across the Rappahannock River from the growing town of Fredericksburg. This is the place that will truly shape your boyhood. It is less grand than the other properties, a working farm where the boundary between the wild and the cultivated is thin. From the porch, you can see the ships coming and going, bringing goods from England and taking tobacco back across the Atlantic. You watch the ferries shuttle people and wagons across the river, a constant stream of life and commerce. It's here that you learn to ride horses with a skill that will one day become legendary. You learn to handle a small boat on the temperamental river, and you explore the woods and fields with a boundless energy. But your education is a source of anxiety. The precise nature of your early schooling remains a subject of some debate among biographers. Unlike the sons of the truly wealthy elite, you are not sent to England. Your formal education is likely practical and rudimentary, picked up from local tutors or perhaps a small school in Fredericksburg. You learn mathematics, which you excel at, mastering trigonometry and the complex art of surveying. You learn to read and write with a clear, strong hand, but you lack the classical education in Latin and Greek that marks a true gentleman of the era. This perceived deficiency will gnaw at you for the rest of your life, fueling a quiet insecurity and a powerful desire for self-improvement. This desire is captured in a small book you keep as a teenager. Sometime around the age of 16, you meticulously copy out 110 maxims, the rules of civility and decent behavior in company and conversation. These are not your inventions. They are derived from a French Jesuit text. But the act of copying them, of internalizing them, is profoundly revealing. Every action done in company ought to be with some sign of respect to those that are present. You write, in the presence of others, sing not to yourself with a humming noise, nor drum with your fingers or feet. Labor to keep alive in your breast that little spark of celestial fire called conscience. This isn't just a schoolboy's exercise. It is a roadmap. It is a deliberate effort to sand down your rustic edges, to build a character worthy of the station you wish to achieve. It is the beginning of a lifelong project of self-invention. Then, when you are just 11, the world fractures. Your father, Augustine, dies suddenly. The promise of an English education, the stability of his presence, and the bulk of his prime properties, including Little Hunting Creek, all go to Lawrence. You, As the eldest son of the second marriage, inherit Ferry Farm and a handful of enslaved people. Your future, once guided by a man of growing influence, is now in the hands of your cautious, controlling mother. Your path to becoming a great man has just become significantly steeper. The world has shown you its precariousness, and the lesson is not lost on you. You are no longer just a boy watching the river flow by. You are a young man with a diminished inheritance, a powerful ambition, and a set of rules on how to behave. The forging of George Washington has begun not in a crucible of war, but in the quiet, desperate calculus of a fatherless boy in a world that respects only land, status, and power. The world that your father's death threatened to shrink has, paradoxically, begun to expand. Though Ferry Farm is your home, your heart and your ambition are drawn across the river and into a different echelon of society. You find yourself spending more and more time at Mount Vernon with Lawrence and, even more intoxicatingly, at the grand neighboring estate of Belvoir. Belvoir is the seat of Colonel William Fairfax, Lawrence's father-in-law and one of the most powerful men in Virginia. To step into Belvoir is to step into the world you have only read about in your book of civility, where Ferry Farm is a study in rustic functionality. Belvoir is a masterpiece of Georgian elegance and order. The brick is perfectly pointed. The windows are large and clear, and inside, the rooms are filled with mahogany furniture, imported fabrics, and the quiet, confident murmur of political discussion. Here, you learn to watch and to listen. You are a tall, somewhat awkward teenager, acutely aware of your provincial manners and lack of formal polish. You sit at dinner tables where talk is not of crop prices, but of parliamentary debates in London, of military strategy, and of the vast, unclaimed lands to the west, the Ohio Valley. This land is a subject of intense speculation and immense strategic importance, a source of potential conflict with the French, and a fountain of unimaginable wealth for those bold enough to claim it. You listen to Colonel Fairfax, a man who sees in you a raw potential, a seriousness that belumps your years, and you are introduced to his son, George William Fairfax, and his brilliant, captivating wife, Sally. She is your intellectual superior, witty and well-read, and you are immediately, if shyly, enthralled. She represents a refinement you aspire to, and your conversations with her, however stilted on your part, are another form of education. Your brother Lawrence and Colonel Fairfax see your proficiency with mathematics not as a mere trade, but as a key to the Western lands. They are investors in the Ohio Company, a venture aimed at settling the very wilderness being discussed around those fine dining tables. And they need men who can go out there, into that vast, dangerous unknown, and measure it, tame it with numbers. They need surveyors, and so your path becomes clear. It isn't the path of a classical scholar, but it is a path of action, a way to earn a name and a fortune on your own terms. In the spring of 1748, at just 16 years old, you are invited to join a surveying party led by George William Fairfax. The destination is the Fairfax holdings in the Shenandoah Valley, a rugged frontier beyond the first ridge of the Blue Ridge Mountains. This is it, your first real departure from the world you know. You saddle your horse, your mind a mix of exhilaration and apprehension. The journey itself is a shock to the system. The manicured elegance of Belvoir gives way to rough, muddy tracks. The inns are crude, flea-bitten affairs where you are lucky to get a pile of straw for a bed. You quickly learn to prefer sleeping outdoors, wrapped in a single blanket under the stars. The immense silence of the wilderness broken only by the crackle of your campfire and the hoot of an owl. Your tools are a compass and a Gunter's chain, basically a very long, heavy metal chain that seems specifically designed to get snagged on every single root, rock, and thorny bush in a 50-mile radius. It's character building, or at least that's what you tell yourself as you spend an hour untangling it for the 10th time. You and the party push deeper into the valley. You encounter German settlers, their English broken, their ways rough, living in small, isolated communities. You learn to make do, to eat what you can hunt or what little you can carry. One evening, an unexpected and thrilling event occurs. A party of 30 Native Americans, returning from a skirmish, appears at your campsite. They are painted for war, and they carry a fresh scalp. There is a moment of tense silence, but then they share their fire and perform a war dance. You watch, mesmerized, from a safe distance, describing it later in your journal with a detached curiosity. This is not the abstract world of politics and maps. This is the raw, untamed reality of the frontier. You are no longer just a boy from Ferry Farm. You are an observer, a chronicler, a participant in the westward push of an empire. After a month of this arduous work, you return to the settled world caked in grime, your clothes in tatters, but with something new in your eyes. You have been tested and not found wanting. You have mapped the land, but the land has also mapped something onto you: resilience, self-reliance, a quiet confidence. The experience solidifies your reputation. You are seen now not just as Lawrence's younger brother, but as a capable young man with a valuable and difficult skill. Some historians question whether his ambition was purely for status, or if a genuine love for the wild frontier also drove him. As you stand on a ridge, looking out over a valley that has never been accurately measured, a sea of green stretching to the horizon, it's easy to believe it was both. You're essentially cataloging the future backyards and housing developments of America, though at this moment, it's mostly just trees, bears, and a nagging suspicion that you forgot to pack enough clean shirts. The success of this trip leads to a significant opportunity. The following year, in 1749, thanks to the Fairfax influence, you present yourself at the courthouse in Culpeper County. There, at the remarkably young age of 17, you are examined and officially appointed as the county surveyor. This isn't just an informal gig, it's a public office. It's a steady, lucrative position that grants you legal authority. You are now a professional, a man of standing in your own right. The fees you earn are substantial, and for the first time, you have your own money, and you begin to do with it what all ambitious Virginians do: you buy land. You purchase your first tracts in the Shenandoah, the very land you had so recently measured. It is the first step in building your own empire, piece by piece, chain by chain. For the next 2 years, you are almost constantly in the field. You lead your own surveying parties now. You are the one in charge. The work is physically punishing. You wade through ice-cold rivers, endure swarms of insects, sleep in crude shelters or under the open sky, and are constantly damp and dirty. You share a single, cramped tent with your assistants, and personal hygiene is, let's just say, it's not a top priority. You begin to appreciate why your mother was so insistent on airing out the bed sheets back at Ferry Farm. But this hardship forges you. You become incredibly strong, your tall frame hardening into lean muscle. You develop an almost preternatural sense of terrain, an ability to read the landscape, to see its strategic advantages and its hidden dangers. It is a skill that will one day be worth more than all the tobacco in Virginia. This period of your life is quiet, unglamorous, and largely unrecorded, but it is perhaps one of the most formative. You are learning the art of command, the science of logistics, and the deep, abiding geography of the continent you will one day be asked to lead. The rhythm of your life, a steady cadence of horses' hooves and the pull of a surveyor's chain, is about to be broken by a far more somber beat. Your brother, Lawrence, your guide and hero, is fading. The cough that has plagued him for years has settled deep in his lungs, a telltale sign of the dreaded consumption tuberculosis. In a desperate attempt to find a cure, a plan is formed. You will accompany him on a sea voyage to the British colony of Barbados, a place fabled for its restorative tropical climate. The idea is that the warm, salt-laced sea air will do what Virginian doctors cannot. It's the 18th century equivalent of being told to try a new supplement and maybe drink more water for a major illness. The medical advice is well-intentioned, but, scientifically speaking, a bit of a long shot. In the autumn of 1751, you board a ship. It is your first and only time leaving the shores of North America. The voyage itself is an education. The vast, unforgiving expanse of the Atlantic, a powerful reminder of your own smallness. When you arrive in Barbados, the world that greets you is a sensory overload. The air is thick, sweet, and heavy, smelling of molasses, tropical blossoms, and the ever-present sea. The colors are impossibly vibrant, the sunlight sharper than you've ever known. You are a guest in the homes of wealthy sugar planters, men whose fortunes make the Virginia gentry seem almost modest. You attend dinners, go to the theater, and do your best to navigate a social scene that is both familiar in its Britishness and utterly foreign in its island context. But this tropical paradise has a dark side. You are keenly aware of the brutal system of slavery that powers the sugar industry, an institution even more nakedly harsh than the one you know back home. And the island has another danger lurking. Within weeks of your arrival, you fall ill. This is not a common cold. It is a raging fever, followed by the terrifying eruption of pustules. You have contracted smallpox, a scourge of the 18th century. It is decidedly not on the travel itinerary. For days, you are confined to a dark room, your life hanging in the balance, but your formidable constitution, hardened by years on the frontier, pulls you through. You survive. The disease leaves you with a few faint scars on your face, a permanent reminder of your brush with death, the unintended silver lining. Surviving it gives you lifelong immunity. It's the most brutal vaccination program imaginable, but it's an immunity that will prove incredibly valuable in the years to come, when the disease rips through the ranks of your future army. Your recovery is a stark contrast to Lawrence's decline. The Barbadian air works no magic. He continues to weaken, his hope dwindling with each passing day. A deep melancholy settles over the trip. You eventually sail back to Virginia alone, leaving Lawrence to make one last, futile attempt to recover in Bermuda before he finally gives up and returns home to die. In the summer of 1752, at the age of just 34, Lawrence Washington passes away at Mount Vernon. The loss is immense. You have lost not just a brother, but the central pillar of your young adult life, the man who opened every door for you. His will names you as one of his executors and sets in motion a chain of events that will alter your destiny. Lawrence leaves Mount Vernon to his wife, Anne, and their infant daughter, Sarah, but in the event of their deaths, the estate is to pass to you. Fate, it seems, is not done with its cruel turns. Little Sarah dies within 2 years. Anne remarries and leases Mount Vernon to you. You, George Washington, at the age of 22, become the master of the estate you had so long admired from a distance. The responsibility is staggering. Suddenly, your world is not the vast, open frontier, but the meticulously organized fields, workshops, and slave quarters of a major plantation. You've essentially gone from being a self-made man camping in the mud to the CEO of a major agricultural enterprise. The learning curve is steep, and your biggest concern is no longer a tangled surveyor's chain, but the fluctuating price of tobacco in London and whether you have enough salt to cure the hams for the winter. It's a different kind of wilderness. You throw yourself into the management of Mount Vernon with the same methodical energy you once applied to surveying. You study the latest agricultural treatises from England, experimenting with crop rotation and fertilization. You are a demanding but fair master of the estate, overseeing the work of dozens of enslaved people, a reality that you accept as the foundation of your newfound wealth and status. Your days are filled with ledgers, crop reports, and the endless complexities of running a self-contained community. You are building a reputation not just as a landowner, but as a superb administrator. Yet, a crucial piece is missing. To be a true member of the Virginia gentry, a man needs a wife. An advantageous marriage is the final step in securing one's place in society. In 1758, your life intersects with that of Martha Dandridge Custis. She is, by any measure, the most eligible widow in the colony. Her first husband, the wealthy Daniel Parke Custis, has left her with a vast fortune, including thousands of acres of prime land and hundreds of enslaved people. She is also a mother, with 2 young children, John Jackie and Martha Patsy. You are introduced, and the courtship is brief and decisive. Academic circles remain divided about the precise nature of his relationship with Martha. Was it a cold, pragmatic business arrangement, your rising status and military reputation for her immense wealth? Or was there a foundation of genuine affection and respect that quietly grew into love? The truth, as it often does, likely lies somewhere in between. Your surviving letters to her are warm and filled with sincere concern for her well-being, and for her part, she seems to have found in you a source of strength and stability after the trauma of her husband's death. She is not a flighty girl, but a capable, intelligent woman who has managed a great estate on her own. She brings to the marriage not just wealth, but a quiet dignity and a deep well of emotional resilience. In January of 1759, you are married. You are 26 years old. With this union, your transformation is complete. You are now one of the wealthiest men in Virginia. You return to Mount Vernon with Martha and her children, and the house begins to feel like a true home. You become a devoted stepfather, showing more open affection to Jackie and Patsy than you were ever shown as a child. You order toys and books for them from London, worry over their education, and fret over their health. This marriage solidifies your position, expands your land holdings, and provides you with the domestic foundation that will support you through the unimaginable trials to come. The solitary surveyor is gone, replaced by the master of Mount Vernon, a respected member of the House of Burgesses, and a husband and father. You have arrived. You have achieved the security and status you so desperately craved as a fatherless boy. But the quiet life of a gentleman farmer is not the one that history has in store for you. The whispers of discontent you once heard at the Fairfax's dinner table are growing louder, becoming a rumble that will soon shake the foundations of your entire world. The comfortable rhythm of life as a gentleman planter, a life you so carefully constructed, cannot hold. The world beyond Mount Vernon's serene fields is growing loud and restive. Those conversations you once overheard at Belvoir about the Ohio Valley are no longer theoretical. The French are building forts. The Ohio Company's claims are threatened, and the governor of Virginia needs a man with your unique qualifications, knowledge of the frontier, loyalty to the crown, and an almost reckless willingness to take on impossible tasks. Your peaceful retirement from the surveyor's life is officially over, before you've even had a chance to properly wear in your new domestic slippers. You are pulled back into the wilderness. In late 1753, Governor Robert Dinwiddie gives you your first military commission. You are now Major Washington. It's a title that sounds much grander than your actual experience, which to this point has mostly involved fighting with stubborn tree roots and mosquitoes. Your mission is not one of conquest, but of diplomacy, at least on the surface. You are to lead a small party deep into the Ohio country, in the dead of approaching winter, find the French commander, and deliver a letter. The letter essentially says, "Excuse me, we believe you have built your forts on land belonging to King George. Could you please dismantle them and leave?" It's the 18th century equivalent of sending a very strongly worded email that you are almost certain will be read, laughed at, and then promptly used to light a pipe. The journey is brutal, a 1,000-mile round trip through freezing rain and snow. It tests every ounce of the resilience you gained as a surveyor. You meet with local Native American leaders, attempting to secure their loyalty, and finally arrive at the French outpost, Fort Le Boeuf. The French commander receives you with perfect, chilly politeness, entertains you for dinner, and gives you a sealed reply for your governor. The answer, as you suspected, is a firm but courteous non. The return journey is even more harrowing. To save time, you and your guide, the seasoned frontiersman Christopher Gist, abandon the main party and press ahead on foot. You are ambushed by a Native American guide whose loyalties were misplaced. He fires a musket at you from point-blank range and misses. You survive that. Later, while crossing the frozen Allegheny River on a makeshift raft, you are thrown into the icy water and nearly drown, saved only by clinging to the raft until you can find refuge on a small island. You arrive back in the Virginia capital of Williamsburg, half frozen but alive, a hero for simply having survived. Your detailed journal of the expedition is published, and for the first time, your name is known beyond the borders of Virginia. Your report confirms the French have no intention of leaving. The time for letters is over. The following spring, in 1754, you are promoted to lieutenant colonel and sent back to the Ohio country, this time with a small force of Virginian troops. Your orders are to build a fort at the forks of the Ohio, modern-day Pittsburgh, and to make prisoners of or kill and destroy any who resist. You soon learn that the French have already driven off the British builders and constructed their own, much larger stronghold, Fort Duquesne. Undeterred, you press on. An allied Seneca chief, Tanacharison, informs you that a small French party is hiding nearby. What happens next is shrouded in the fog of a forest dawn. You lead your men to surround the French encampment. In a short, bloody skirmish, your forces kill or capture nearly the entire French detachment. The French commander, Joseph Coulon de Villiers de Jumonville, is among the dead. Historians still argue whether the Jumonville Glen incident was a legitimate military engagement against a hostile scouting party or a rash assassination of a diplomatic envoy. Whatever the truth, you have fired the first shots of a war that will set the world on fire. You retreat and hastily construct a crude stockade in a low-lying meadow, aptly named Fort Necessity. The French, enraged by the killing of Jumonville, retaliate in force. They descend on your pitiful fort with a much larger contingent of French soldiers and their Native American allies, pinned down in your waterlogged trenches under a torrential downpour, your gunpowder soaked and your men falling around you. You have no choice. On July 4th, a date that will gain a much different significance later in your life, you surrender. It is a profound humiliation. To make matters worse, the surrender document, written in French which you cannot read, has you admit to the assassination of Jumonville. You return to Virginia in disgrace, the taste of your first command one of bitter defeat. But your ambition is not so easily extinguished. The next year, 1755, the British send their own army under the command of General Edward Braddock to dislodge the French. You, eager to learn the art of European warfare and clear your name, volunteer to serve as his aide-de-camp. You are in awe of Braddock's professional force, a river of red-coated soldiers with their polished brass cannon and meticulous discipline. But you are also quietly appalled by their methods. You quickly learn there are two types of officers: British regulars, who often bought their commissions and view colonists as little better than talking bears, and you. They see your practical, Frontier One knowledge as unrefined, while you see their plan to march in tight formation through a dense, hostile forest as, well, just a terribly bad idea. Your fears are realized at the Battle of the Monongahela. As Braddock's force approaches Fort Duquesne, they are ambushed by a smaller French and Indian force that uses the forest for cover, wreaking havoc on the exposed British lines. It is a slaughter. Braddock is mortally wounded. Chaos erupts. But in the midst of the panic, you are a rock. You ride back and forth across the battlefield, carrying orders, rallying the terrified Virginians, seemingly immune to the danger. You have 2 horses shot out from under you. 4 musket balls tear through your coat and hat. By some miracle, you are unharmed. You manage to organize a retreat, saving the remnant of the army from complete annihilation. Your humiliation at Fort Necessity is erased, replaced by universal acclaim for your courage. You are the hero of the Monongahela. Your heroism earns you the command of the entire Virginia regiment, with the rank of colonel. For the next 3 years, you are tasked with the grueling, thankless job of defending a 350-mile frontier with a few hundred men. It is a period of profound frustration. You battle not just enemy raiding parties, but the indifference of the colonial government, a chronic lack of supplies, and the arrogance of the British military establishment. You plead for the authority to carry the fight to the enemy, to take Fort Duquesne, but you are ignored. Most galling of all is the issue of rank. A British captain, by virtue of his royal commission, could command you, a colonial colonel. This injustice, this clear statement that you and your fellow colonists are second-class subjects, plants a deep and bitter seed of resentment. You are fighting and dying for the British Empire, but you will never truly be one of them. You are a Virginian, and that distinction is becoming more important every single day. You resign your commission in 1758 after the British finally succeed in capturing Fort Duquesne. You are just 27 years old, but you feel like a man who has already lived a full lifetime in the crucible of the frontier. You return to Mount Vernon, to your new wife and your new life, with a profound sense of relief. After years of sleeping on the cold, hard ground and worrying about ambushes in the dark, the relative tranquility of managing crop rotations and arguing with your London merchant over tobacco prices feels like a spa vacation. You trade your dusty blue Virginia regiment uniform for the fine clothes of a gentleman planter. You sink back into the life you thought you wanted, focusing on your duties in the House of Burgesses in Williamsburg and striving to make Mount Vernon a model of agricultural efficiency. For more than a decade, this is your world. You are a respected, if not particularly loud, member of the Colonial Assembly. You are known for your sound judgment and your quiet diligence rather than for fiery speeches. You listen intently as men like the passionate, electrifying Patrick Henry rail against the crown. At first, you, like many of your peers, consider yourself a proud British subject merely seeking to defend your rights. The idea of a complete break, of independence, is a radical thought, a whisper on the fringes. Your grievances are those of a frustrated businessman and a proud veteran. You resent the British merchants who control your profits and the military hierarchy that treated you as an inferior. Then the whispers grow into a roar. The British government, deeply in debt from the 7 Years' War, the very war you fought in, decides the American colonies should foot part of the bill. In 1765, Parliament passes the Stamp Act, imposing a direct tax on nearly every piece of paper you use. Suddenly, your newspapers, legal documents, tavern licenses, and even your playing cards require a special, taxed stamp. It's the 18th century version of an incredibly annoying and inescapable service fee that shows up on every single transaction. The colonial response is furious and unexpectedly unified. Protest, boycotts, and riots erupt. You, in the House of Burgesses, watch and approve as resolutions are passed condemning the act as unconstitutional, as taxation without representation. The Stamp Act is repealed, but the principle remains. The British government insists on its right to tax you. More acts follow the Townshend Acts, taxing glass, lead, paint, and tea. More protests, more boycotts. You are not a rabble-rouser, but a man of property and order. Your method of protest is economic. You become a leader in Virginia's non-importation agreements, urging your fellow planters to stop buying British goods, to hit England in its pocketbook. You write in a letter that the colonists should starve their trade and manufactures. This is a radicalizing experience. You are beginning to see that your interests and those of the mother country are not aligned. They are, in fact, diverging at an alarming rate. The situation escalates. The Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party. In response, a furious Parliament passes the Coercive Acts, or what the colonists call the Intolerable Acts, in 1774. The port of Boston is closed, Massachusetts is placed under military rule, and the last vestiges of colonial self-government are stripped away. This is the final straw. An attack on one colony is an attack on all. Virginia leads the call for a Congress, a meeting of delegates from all the colonies to formulate a unified response. You are chosen as one of Virginia's 7 delegates. In the late summer of 1774, you journey to Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. The city is buzzing, the air thick with purpose and anxiety. You are meeting men from New England, from the middle colonies, men with different accents, different economies, and different religions, but all sharing a common sense of grievance. You are quieter than many, listening more than you speak, but your presence is powerful. At 6'2", you tower over most of your contemporaries. Your quiet gravitas and your well-known military record give your words weight when you do choose to speak. You leave the Congress with a renewed sense of colonial unity, but with little hope for a peaceful resolution. You write to a friend that you believe the die is now cast. You return to Mount Vernon and begin to put your affairs in order, sensing that your peaceful life is about to end. You drill local militia companies in Virginia, your old military instincts reawakening. Then, in the spring of 1775, the news arrives like a thunderclap. The battles of Lexington and Concord. British regulars have fired on Massachusetts militiamen. Blood has been shed. The time for petitions and boycotts is over. War is upon you. You ride back to Philadelphia for the Second Continental Congress, the mood now grim and resolute. The central question hanging in the humid air of the Pennsylvania State House is no longer how to protest, but how to fight. The militiamen surrounding the British in Boston need a leader. The colonies need an army, and an army needs a commander. All eyes, it seems, turn to you. You are the obvious, almost inevitable choice. You are a Southerner, a Virginian, and your appointment would bind the powerful Southern colonies to what has, until now, been a New England fight. You have more military experience than anyone else in the room. You are a man of significant wealth, which reassures the other delegates that you have a stake in the cause and are not some adventurer seeking power. And you have the good sense to show up for every session wearing your old blue and buff colonel's uniform. It isn't a subtle gesture, but it's a powerful one. It's like showing up for a major job interview wearing the company's branded gear. It clearly signals your readiness for the role. There is considerable scholarly discussion surrounding your motives for accepting the command. Was it pure, selfless patriotism, a sense of unavoidable duty? Or was it also the burning ambition that had driven you since you were a boy, a final, ultimate chance to achieve the military glory that had been denied you by the British? The most likely answer is all of the above. On June 15, 1775, John Adams of Massachusetts rises and formally nominates you to be General and Commander-in-Chief of the new Continental Army. The vote is unanimous. The next day, you stand before the Congress to accept. You are not triumphant. Your speech is short and filled with a genuine, heavy humility. You speak of your consciousness of the want of abilities and military experience for such a momentous task. You feel, you say, a deep and painful anxiety. In a move of brilliant political theater and sincere principle, you declare that you will accept no salary for your service, asking only that Congress cover your expenses. You are casting yourself not as a Caesar, but as Cincinnatus, the Roman farmer who left his plow to save the Republic and then dutifully returned to it. You are accepting command of a lost cause, an army of farmers and shopkeepers that does not yet truly exist, against the most powerful military force on earth. The weight of it all feels immense, a physical presence in the room. You have just been handed the fate of a nation that has not yet even declared itself to be one. Your life as a planter is over, forever. The next chapter will be written in blood, mud, and the frozen misery of a long and desperate war. You leave Philadelphia in the summer of 1775, a commander without an army, heading towards a war that exists only in theory and in the scattered fields of Massachusetts. The journey north is a procession. In every town, people line the roads to catch a glimpse of the man who holds their fragile hopes. When you finally arrive in Cambridge, you see the reality of your new command. This is less an organized army and more a large, disgruntled committee of armed men, mostly New England farmers and merchants who all have strong opinions about military discipline, most of which involve not having any. Their primary uniform seems to be whatever they were wearing when they left the farm. Your first task is simply to bring order to this chaos, to instill discipline, and to begin the long, slow process of forging a unified force from 13 disparate colonies. The first year is a strange mix of stalemate and success. You manage to force the British to evacuate Boston by placing cannon on Dorchester Heights, a masterful strategic stroke, but the celebration is short-lived. You move the army to New York, where you are soundly beaten. The British Army, a professional and ruthless machine, outmaneuvers you, defeats you on Long Island, and forces you into a desperate, humiliating retreat across New Jersey. Your new army seems to be dissolving before your eyes. Enlistments are set to expire. Morale is shattered. The revolution appears to be over before it has truly begun. It is in this darkest of moments that you pull off the stunning, near miraculous victories at Trenton and Princeton. But those are tales for another part of our journey. For now, know that those victories breathed life back into the cause, but the war grinds on. The following year, 1777, is another campaign of brutal setbacks. The British outfox you at the Battle of Brandywine and again at Germantown. The dream of retaking Philadelphia, the nation's capital, is dashed. The British occupy the city, settling into comfortable lodgings for the winter, ready to enjoy the hospitality of loyalist society. And you, with your exhausted, beaten army of around 12,000 men, must find a place to lick your wounds and somehow survive the winter. You choose a location on the Schuylkill River, a place whose very name will become synonymous with suffering and endurance. Valley Forge. The choice is strategic. Valley Forge is a high, defensible plateau, close enough to Philadelphia to keep pressure on the British and prevent them from foraging in the countryside, but far enough away to be safe from a surprise attack. That is the theory. The reality, as you arrive in December of 1777, is a treeless, windswept plain of frozen mud. There is no shelter. There is no food. There is no hope. Your first order is for the army to build itself a city. You lay out a grid and specify the exact dimensions for hundreds of log huts. It is the most ambitious, and frankly, only, construction project on the books. The alternative is for your men to sleep in their thin tents or out in the open, which, while scenic in a bleak sort of way, is generally considered bad for morale and for the basic function of staying alive. You refuse to take comfortable lodgings for yourself, choosing to live in a canvas tent just like your men until their huts are complete. It is a gesture, but a powerful one. You are a constant presence, riding through the camp every day, your tall frame a familiar silhouette against the gray winter sky. What you see would break a lesser man. Your soldiers are not soldiers. They are walking specters. They are half naked, their uniforms long since disintegrated into rags. They wrap themselves in tattered blankets. Men mount guard with their feet bound in cloth, as their shoes have rotted away. You can track their patrols by the bloody footprints they leave in the snow. The cold is a relentless enemy, but a greater one is starvation. The Army's supply system, a convoluted and inefficient mess run by a bickering Continental Congress, has completely collapsed. The promised provisions never arrive. The men are reduced to eating fire cake, a nauseating paste of flour and water cooked over a smoky fire. Sometimes, there is not even that. The air in the cramped, poorly ventilated huts is thick with the smell of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and the ever-present stench of disease, typhoid, dysentery, influenza, and pneumonia tear through the camp like a phantom army, killing far more men than British muskets ever could. A constant, hacking cough is the camp's unofficial anthem. Over the course of that single winter, more than 2,000 of your men will die without a single shot being fired. Your headquarters, a small stone house you eventually move into, becomes a factory of correspondence. By the flickering light of a candle, you write letter after desperate letter to Congress, to the governors of the states, to anyone who will listen. Your prose, usually so measured and formal, now burns with a controlled rage. You write of men without clothes to cover their nakedness, without blankets to lay on, without shoes, without a house or hut to cover them. You warn that unless something changes, the Army will either starve, dissolve, or disperse. And as you fight to keep your army from freezing or starving to death, another, more insidious threat emerges from within. While you struggle at Valley Forge, some of your fellow generals and certain members of Congress are warm and well-fed in their taverns and boarding houses, whispering that you are not the man for the job. It is the 18th century version of getting passive-aggressive emails from the corporate office while you're struggling to keep a project alive in the field. This loose-knit movement, which becomes known as the Conway Cabal, schemes to have you replaced by General Horatio Gates, the so-called hero of Saratoga. The extent to which this was a truly organized plot versus a collection of disgruntled complaints is a matter of ongoing historical debate, but the threat to your command is very real. You handle it with masterful political skill, confronting your detractors, managing your allies, and letting the conspiracy collapse under the weight of its own pettiness. Your authority, once challenged, emerges stronger than ever. Just as the winter seems at its most hopeless, a glimmer of light appears. In February, a man arrives in camp who will change everything. He is Baron Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben, a Prussian captain who comes with a letter of introduction from Benjamin Franklin and a resume that is, shall we say, slightly embellished. He claims to have been a lieutenant general under Frederick the Great. He was not, but what he does have is an encyclopedic knowledge of military drill and discipline. He speaks almost no English, communicating through a stream of guttural German and French curses, which your aides dutifully translate for the troops. He is appalled by the state of your army. He finds sentries sitting down, their muskets covered in rust. He finds no standardized system of anything. He immediately sets to work. He takes a single, model company of 100 men and, on the grand parade ground, begins to drill them himself. This is revolutionary. High-ranking officers did not personally train common soldiers, but von Steuben does, day after day. He bellows and swears and demonstrates, turning this ragged group of individuals into a precise, coordinated unit. He teaches them how to march in formation, how to handle their bayonets, how to fire and reload with speed and efficiency. The rest of the army watches, at first with amusement, then with awe. Soon, the men he trained are sent out to train other companies. The discipline is infectious. For the first time, your men begin to look and act like a professional army. It gives them a renewed sense of pride, a purpose beyond mere survival. The crucible of Valley Forge did not destroy your army. It burned away its impurities and forged it into steel. The transformation that begins at Valley Forge is not just one of discipline and drill. The brutal lessons of the previous campaigns, especially the disastrous defense of New York, have taught you a hard-won truth, courage, and patriotism are not enough. A musket is useless if it's pointed in the wrong direction. You have learned that wars are won not only on the open battlefield, but in the shadows, in whispers, and with information passed on scraps of paper. You realize early on that knowing what the enemy is having for breakfast is almost as important as knowing their battle plans. It speaks to their supply levels, their morale, and whether they are still eating that dreadful hardtack biscuit. Information is power, especially when the other side has more men, more ships, and more guns. You need eyes and ears behind enemy lines. You need to become a spy master. Your first forays into espionage were clumsy and tragic. The story of Nathan Hale, the young Yale-educated captain you sent to gather intelligence on Long Island, haunts you. He was brave, idealistic, and a terrible spy. Disguised as a Dutch schoolmaster, he was almost immediately caught by the British, carrying incriminating documents. Before they hanged him without trial, he is said to have uttered the immortal words, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." His death was a noble sacrifice, but a tactical failure. It taught you that idealism needs to be protected by professionalism. You cannot afford to lose any more Nathan Hales. You need a network that is subtle, sophisticated, and secret. And so, in the late summer of 1778, after the British have abandoned Philadelphia and consolidated their forces in New York City, the real work begins. You summon a young major from Connecticut, a man named Benjamin Tallmadge. Tallmadge is intelligent, disciplined, and, most importantly, he knows the landscape of Long Island and the people who live there. He is the perfect man to build and run your new intelligence network. Together, you devise a plan for a ring of spies that will operate right under the noses of the British High Command in New York. This will become the Culper Ring, named after the fake surname you devise for its key agents. The structure is brilliant in its compartmentalization. At its heart are two men. The first is Abraham Woodhull, a reclusive farmer from Setauket, Long Island, codenamed Samuel Culper, Sr. Woodhull is nervous and perpetually anxious, but he is also meticulous and has a plausible reason to travel around the area, gathering information on British ship movements and troop deployments. The second, and more crucial, agent is a man he recruits in New York City. For many years, the true identity of the key agent, Culper Jr., was one of the great unsolved mysteries of the Revolution, though historians now generally agree he was Robert Townsend. Townsend is a quiet Quaker merchant who runs a coffee shop and writes for a loyalist newspaper. His position gives him access to British officers and loyalist businessmen. He can listen to the gossip, the complaints, and the boasts, piecing together a picture of British plans from the inside. Getting the information from Townsend's pen in New York to your headquarters is a perilous journey. The system they create is a masterpiece of secret communication, or tradecraft. Townsend, as Culper Jr. writes his reports, often on specially treated paper. Your agents have developed a whole system of codes, ciphers, and even an invisible ink. The recipe for the sympathetic stain involves ferrous sulfate and heat, which sounds like a dangerously boring high school chemistry experiment. But if it keeps a vital message out of the hands of the British, you're willing to try anything. You just hope your agents don't accidentally set the letters on fire while trying to read them. Once a message is ready, a courier, usually a tavern keeper named Austin Rowe, makes the dangerous 55-mile ride from New York through heavily patrolled territory to Setauket. He hides the letter in a prearranged dead drop in a box buried in Woodhull's pasture. Woodhull then retrieves the message and waits for a signal. That signal comes from a neighbor, Anna Strong. She has a clothesline in her yard that is clearly visible from the bay. By arranging her laundry in a specific way, a black petticoat meant a certain whaleboat captain was ready, she could signal the location for a pickup. The captain, Caleb Brewster, a famously daring man who delights in taunting the British, would then row his small boat across the heavily patrolled Long Island Sound to a hidden cove, pick up the intelligence, and deliver it to Major Tallmadge, who would finally bring it to you. It is a slow, cumbersome, and incredibly dangerous process. A single weak link could bring the entire chain crashing down. These aren't soldiers with muskets and the protection of an army. They are farmers, tavern keepers, and merchants. Their only weapon is their nerve. If caught, there is no prisoner of war camp. There is just a short, summary trial and a long, slow drop from a hangman's noose. It is a job with absolutely no benefits package. You are keenly aware of this risk. You worry constantly about your agents. In your correspondence with Tallmadge, you refer to them only by their numbers or code names, protecting their identities even in your own private letters. You urge caution above all else. There is nothing more necessary than good intelligence to frustrate a designing enemy. You write, and nothing requires greater pains to obtain. The pains pay off. The Culper ring provides you with a steady stream of valuable intelligence for years. They warn you of planned British troop movements. They uncover a plot to counterfeit continental currency, an act of economic warfare that could have crippled the rebellion. But their greatest triumph comes in the summer of 1780. You receive word that a French fleet, carrying thousands of soldiers to aid your cause, is sailing for Newport, Rhode Island. This French alliance is your best, perhaps only, hope of winning the war. Then, a desperate message arrives from Culper Jr. He has learned that the British commander, General Henry Clinton, is planning a surprise attack. He intends to ambush the French fleet as soon as it arrives, destroying it before the soldiers can even land. The intelligence allows you to make a brilliant countermove. You instruct your army to prepare for a fake attack on New York City. You ensure that a lost dispatch detailing your plans falls into British hands. Clinton, believing New York is about to be assaulted by your entire force, cancels the attack on the French. The ruse works perfectly. The French land safely. The alliance is saved. It is a victory won without firing a single shot, a testament to the quiet, unseen war of shadows you have learned to master. The general who once blundered into an ambush at Fort Necessity has become a shrewd and patient spy master, an architect of deception, proving that sometimes the quietest whispers can be louder than the roar of a cannon. Let us rewind the clock, back from the meticulous shadow war of spies to a moment of raw, desperate action. We must go back to the bleak, closing days of 1776. The elation from the British evacuation of Boston is a distant memory, replaced by the grim reality of constant retreat. Your army has been battered, beaten, and pushed out of New York, chased across the flatlands of New Jersey like a fox fleeing the hounds. Your forces have dwindled from a proud army of 20,000 to a shivering, demoralized remnant of just a few thousand. Soon, you'll have an army composed of just you, a handful of loyal officers, a drummer boy, and a few dozen men who lost their way back to their farms. Morale is so low it's practically subterranean. You have retreated across the Delaware River into Pennsylvania, putting the wide, cold barrier of water between you and the British. The enlistments for most of your remaining soldiers are set to expire at midnight on December 31st. The men are exhausted, starving, and dreaming only of their warm homes. The cause itself seems to be dying. The pamphleteer, Thomas Paine, who is with your army, captures the mood perfectly as he begins to write the immortal lines. These are the times that try men's souls. Defeat feels not just possible, but inevitable. You need a victory, not just a victory, a miracle. And as you sit in your headquarters, the weight of a failing revolution on your shoulders, a desperate, audacious plan begins to form in your mind. The British have halted their pursuit for the winter, leaving a chain of outposts in New Jersey manned by their feared Hessian mercenaries, professional German soldiers hired by King George. The southernmost post, in the small town of Trenton, is garrisoned by about 1/400 of these soldiers under the command of Colonel Johann Rall. Your plan is to recross the Delaware River in the dead of night, march your army 9 miles in the dark, and fall upon the Trenton garrison in a surprise attack just before dawn. When you explain this to your generals, they have a look on their faces that is a mixture of terror and awe, a look that says, "This is either the most brilliant idea in military history, or we're all going to drown." The jury is very much out. The plan is incredibly complex. A 3-pronged attack. 3 separate forces are to cross the river at different points to surround and trap the Hessians. It is a plan that requires precision, timing, and a healthy dose of luck. On Christmas Day, 1776, your soldiers assemble on the banks of the river. The weather, already bitingly cold, turns vicious. A powerful northeaster sweeps in, bringing with it freezing rain, then sleet, then thick, driving snow. The river, already high, begins to fill with large, grinding flows of ice. It seems impossible. 2 of your 3 divisions, led by other generals, will ultimately fail to even make it across the river. The fate of the entire operation, the fate of the revolution itself, rests solely with the 2,400 men under your direct command. As darkness falls, the crossing begins. The only reason it is even possible is because of a regiment of mariners from Marblehead, Massachusetts, commanded by Colonel John Glover. These are not soldiers. They are fishermen and sailors who know the water. They man the heavy, flat-bottomed Durham boats, designed for hauling iron ore, now repurposed as assault craft. Using poles to push away the jagged chunks of ice and their long oars to fight the current, they begin the slow, agonizing process of ferrying your army across the treacherous water. It is a scene from a nightmare. The wind howls, sleet stings any exposed flesh, and the river groans and cracks around them. The men are silent, their fear a palpable thing in the dark. You stand on the bank, a tall, imposing figure wrapped in a dark cloak, watching as boat after boat pushes off into the churning chaos, your face a mask of grim determination. The plan was to have everyone across by midnight. The storm and the ice cause massive delays. It isn't until nearly 3 a.m. that the last man and, crucially, the last of your 18 precious cannons are safely on the New Jersey side. You are hours behind schedule. The sun will be up before you reach Trenton. The element of surprise, your greatest weapon, seems lost. A lesser commander might have called it off, retreated back to safety. But you know there is no safety to retreat to. There is only this one. Desperate chance. You give the order to march. The 9-mile trek to Trenton is an ordeal of its own. The sleet freezes to the men's coats. The roads are sheets of ice. Men whose shoes have long since fallen apart leave bloody tracks in the snow. 2 men literally freeze to death on the march. You ride up and down the line on your horse, your presence a source of strength, your voice low and steady. Press on, boys, you urge them. Press on. Meanwhile, in Trenton, the Hessians are professionals, but it is also Christmas. They have spent the day celebrating, as any soldiers would. The precise role of intelligence in the Hessians' lack of preparation is still debated by military historians. Colonel Rahl had been warned of a possible attack, but he was contemptuous of your army of farmers and dismissed the warnings. You were counting on the Hessians being a little sleepy, a little full, and definitely not thrilled about the prospect of a pre-dawn battle in a blizzard. It's the one part of your desperate gamble that feels remotely plausible. Just before 8 a.m, long after the sun has risen, but with the sky still dark from the storm, your 2 columns converge on the town. The surprise is total. A Hessian sentry raises the alarm, but it's too late. Your men pour into the main streets of Trenton. Your artillery, commanded by a young and energetic Henry Knox, unlimbering to control the key intersections. The Hessians, groggy and confused, rush out of their barracks and into a maelstrom of musket fire and cannon shot. The battle is short, sharp, and brutally efficient. Colonel Rahl is mortally wounded while trying to rally his men, trapped, disorganized, and completely overwhelmed. The Hessians are forced to surrender. In less than an hour, it is over. You have not lost a single man in combat. You have captured nearly 1,000 prisoners, along with a huge cache of muskets, ammunition, and supplies. As you sit on your horse, watching the defeated Hessians lay down their arms, the sheer scale of what you have accomplished begins to sink in. You have pulled the revolution back from the brink of extinction. The news of the victory at Trenton spreads like wildfire, a jolt of electricity through the colonies. A few days later, you will follow it up with another daring victory against British regulars at Princeton. Soldiers who were ready to go home re-enlist. New recruits begin to appear. The cause is not dead. The times are still trying. But for the first time in a long time, you have given the people and your soldiers a reason to hope. The desperate Christmas gamble has paid off. The years after the crucible of Valley Forge and the stunning turnaround at Trenton are a long, grinding slog. The war shifts its focus. After years of trying to pin you down and crush your army around New York, the British High Command decides on a new strategy. They will conquer the South. Their theory is that the southern colonies are teeming with undiscovered loyalists, just waiting to flock to the royal banner and welcome the redcoats with open arms. It's a bit like a band deciding their first album didn't sell, so for their second, they'll try recording it in a completely different language. The results, for the British, are decidedly mixed. At first, the southern strategy seems to work. The British capture Savannah, Then Charleston, inflicting one of the worst defeats of the war on the American cause. The general you send to stop them, the hero of Saratoga, Horatio Gates, is routed at the Battle of Camden in a display of tactical incompetence so profound it's almost impressive. The cause in the South seems lost. But then, you make one of the best decisions of your command. You replace Gates with Nathaniel Greene, your former quartermaster general. Greene is a brilliant strategist. He understands that he doesn't have to win every battle to win the war. He leads the main British commander, Lord Charles Cornwallis, on a grueling chase across the Carolinas. Greene's army is ragged and often beaten in the field, but like a persistent boxer, he keeps landing body blows, wearing his opponent down, forcing Cornwallis to win victories so costly they are almost indistinguishable from defeats. By the summer of 1781, Cornwallis is frustrated and exhausted. He marches his battered army north into Virginia, hoping to finally crush the rebellion there. He eventually consolidates his forces on the coast, at a small tobacco port on a peninsula, a place called Yorktown. He is waiting for the Royal Navy to arrive with supplies, reinforcements, or perhaps an evacuation. Whether Cornwallis's decision to encamp at Yorktown, with his back to the sea, was a catastrophic strategic blunder, or a reasonable gamble based on the justified expectation of British naval supremacy, is a question that military strategists still analyze. For you, however, it is not a question. It is an opportunity, a golden, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. For a year, a French army under the command of the Comte de Rochambeau has been stationed in Rhode Island. You and Rochambeau have been poring over maps, planning a joint operation, most likely a decisive attack on the main British stronghold of New York City. Then, in August, you receive the single most important letter of the entire war. It is from the French admiral, the Comte de Grasse. He is sailing his entire fleet of warships from the West Indies, not to New York, but to the Chesapeake Bay. He will have control of the seas off the Virginia coast, but only for a few weeks, until the end of October when the hurricane season forces him to leave. A window has opened. Cornwallis is in a trap, but he doesn't know it yet. The key is the French fleet. If de Grasse can hold the Chesapeake, Cornwallis cannot be resupplied or rescued by sea. The landward side of the peninsula can be sealed off by an army. Your army. It's a breathtakingly audacious gamble, requiring perfect timing and coordination between armies and navies hundreds of miles apart. You and Rochambeau make a swift, secret decision. The attack on New York is off. The new target is Yorktown. Now you must perform a logistical miracle. You have to move your combined Franco-American army some 9,000 men, plus their artillery, supplies, and animals more than 450 miles from New York to Virginia, without the British commander in New York, Sir Henry Clinton, figuring out what you're doing. It's the 18th century equivalent of trying to get your entire extended family, plus their friends and all their luggage, through an international airport without anyone noticing, complaining, or losing a suitcase. Only your suitcases are full of cannonballs. You begin a grand deception. You have your men build huge brick bread ovens near New York, as if preparing for a long siege. You prepare false dispatches about your plans and ensure they fall into British hands. Clinton takes the bait completely. While he is looking one way, you are marching the other. In late August, your allied armies slip away. You march with incredible speed, day after day, under the hot summer sun. As you pass through Philadelphia, the city cheers you on. You receive the news you have been desperately waiting for. De Grasse's fleet has arrived in the Chesapeake. It's the strategic equivalent of discovering that your opponent in a chess match has just voluntarily put his own king in check. You don't question the good fortune. You just start moving your final pieces into place. Soon after, you learn that de Grasse has engaged the British relief fleet at the Battle of the Chesapeake and driven them off. The trap is now fully sprung. By the end of September, your combined armies have arrived at Yorktown and linked up with a smaller American force already there. Cornwallis looks out from his fortifications to see himself surrounded by a force more than double the size of his own, while the horizon on the bay is a forest of French masts. There is no escape. The siege begins. Under the direction of French engineering experts, your men begin to dig. This is the methodical, scientific warfare of the 18th century. You dig a long trench, the first parallel, just out of enemy artillery range. From there, you dig saps, smaller trenches that zigzag their way closer to the British lines. Day and night. The sound of shovels scraping earth is punctuated by the thunderous, earth-shaking roar of your siege cannons. The bombardment is relentless, a constant drumbeat of destruction, tearing apart the British defenses and morale. The final key to victory is to get your guns even closer. To do that, you must take two critical British outposts, Redoubt No. 9 and Redoubt No. 10. On the night of October 14th, in a dramatic nighttime assault, you send in your troops. The French are assigned one redoubt, the Americans the other. To ensure speed and surprise, the American assault, led by your brilliant and fiery young aide, Alexander Hamilton, is ordered to advance with unloaded muskets, using only the bayonet. In a furious, short burst of fighting, both redoubts are taken. Your men drag cannons into the captured fortifications. Now, your artillery can fire down into the British camp from point-blank range. The situation for Cornwallis is hopeless. His defenses are shattered. His men are sick and exhausted. He makes one last, desperate attempt to ferry his men across the river to escape, but a sudden violent squall scatters his boats. On October 17th, exactly 4 years after the British surrender at Saratoga, a lone British drummer boy appears on the parapet, beating the signal for a parley. A British officer follows, waving a white handkerchief. The cannons fall silent. 2 days later, on the 19th of October, 1781, the surrender ceremony takes place. The British Army, resplendent in their clean red coats, marches out from their ruined fortifications. They are directed between two long lines of their opponents on one side, the French in their immaculate white uniforms, on the other, your Continental Army, a motley collection of men in faded blue, brown, and buckskin. Cornwallis, claiming to be ill, refuses to attend, sending his second-in-command, General O'Hara, to surrender his sword. As the British soldiers march to a field to lay down their weapons, their bands are said to have played a melancholy tune, a ballad popular at the time, whose title perfectly captured the unbelievable moment the world turned upside down. The war is not officially over, but everyone standing in that field knows the truth. You have won. The world may have turned upside down at Yorktown, but it has not yet stopped spinning. The surrender of Cornwallis's army is a decisive, war-winning victory, but it is not the end of the war. You've essentially won the final, climactic battle, but the war isn't officially over. It's like the dramatic season finale of a popular show has aired, but you're stuck waiting 2 long years for the network and the lawyers to sign the paperwork for the official conclusion. It's an awkward, anxious, and dangerous period of limbo. The British still hold New York City, Savannah, and Charleston. The Royal Navy still prowls the coast. And your army, the very tool of victory, must be kept together, kept supplied, and kept ready, just in case. You move the bulk of your forces north to encamp around Newburgh, New York, keeping a wary eye on the British in the city. And here, in the cold, damp Hudson Highlands, a new and insidious enemy emerges, not the redcoats, but boredom, frustration, and bitterness. The elation of victory quickly fades, replaced by the grim realities of an uncertain future. Your soldiers, and especially your officers, have been away from their homes and businesses for years. They have sacrificed everything, and they have not been paid. The Continental Congress, the government you serve, is, to put it mildly, completely broke. It has no power to levy taxes and can only beg the 13 sovereign states for money, which they are reluctant to give. Congress's primary method of payment seems to be a combination of IOUs and heartfelt expressions of patriotic gratitude, neither of which can be used to buy a loaf of bread or pay a mortgage. Your officers are in a particularly dire situation. They had been promised a lifetime pension of half pay in the dark days of Valley Forge to keep them from resigning. Now, they see a future where a bankrupt government will renege on that promise. They fear they will be cast aside, returning home as impoverished heroes, their sacrifices forgotten. The mood in the camp grows dark and mutinous. This simmering resentment is the backdrop for the most dangerous crisis of your leadership, a threat that comes not from a foreign army, but from your own beloved officers. In March of 1783, an anonymous letter begins to circulate through the camp at Newburgh, penned by a disgruntled staff officer. It is a masterpiece of inflammatory rhetoric. It calls the officers to a meeting to discuss their grievances. It mocks the weakness of Congress and suggests that their gentle petitions have failed. The letter proposes a terrifying ultimatum. Either the army should refuse to disband when the war ends, essentially using the threat of the military to hold the nation hostage until they are paid, or, if the war continues, they should abandon the fight and retreat to the wilderness, leaving the country to its fate. It is a call for a military coup, a direct challenge to the authority of Congress and to every principle the revolution was fought for. The degree to which the Newburgh conspiracy was a spontaneous officer-led movement versus a carefully orchestrated piece of political theater by nationalist politicians wanting to use the army's discontent to frighten the states into strengthening the central government remains a point of contention among historians. But for you, the threat is real and existential. You are horrified. This is the ultimate betrayal of the cause. You immediately forbid the unauthorized meeting, but in a brilliant move, you call for an official meeting of your own a few days later, ostensibly to hear a report from a congressional committee. On the appointed day, the officers gather in a large wooden hall, a building they call the Temple of Virtue. The air is thick with anger and a sense of righteous betrayal. They believe you will not attend. The meeting begins, and just as the senior officer present starts to speak, the door at the back of the hall opens. You stride in. A shocked silence falls over the room. You walk to the front, turn to face your men, and pull a prepared speech from your coat pocket. You begin to read, your voice steady as you admonish them for considering a path that would open the floodgates of civil discord and deluge our rising empire in blood. You appeal to their honor, their patriotism, their shared sacrifice, but the men are unmoved. Their faces are hard, their arms crossed. Your logic is failing to pierce their wall of bitterness. You falter, sensing you are losing them. You then decide to read a letter from a congressman that speaks to their cause. As you look down at the paper, you seem to have trouble with the words. You pause, and then you do something no one in that room has ever seen you do in public. You reach into your pocket and pull out a new pair of reading glasses. You look up at your men, your expression one of weary vulnerability. "Gentlemen," you say, your voice soft and tired, "you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have not only grown gray, but almost blind in the service of my country." The effect is instantaneous and overwhelming. It is not a line in a speech. It is a simple, human admission of shared struggle and sacrifice. In that moment, you are not just their formidable general. You are an old, tired man who has endured everything they have, and more. The officers, these tough, battle-hardened men, openly weep. The anger in the room dissolves, replaced by a wave of shame and a rekindled affection for the commander who had led them through so much. The conspiracy evaporates on the spot. You have not defeated a mutiny with force, but with the sheer moral power of your own character. A few months later, the news finally arrives. The Treaty of Paris has been signed. The war is officially over. Great Britain has recognized the United States of America as a free and independent nation. Your work is done. Now, you must perform your final, and perhaps most important, act as commander. In an era when a victorious general was almost universally expected to become a king, a dictator, or at least the head of state, your plan is to simply go home. It's a decision so radical it's almost incomprehensible to the rest of the world. It's like winning the world championship and then immediately returning to your quiet desk job on Monday morning. On December 23rd, 1783, you travel to Annapolis, Maryland, where the Congress of the Confederation is meeting. You enter the Maryland State House, the room packed with delegates. You stand and, with a voice thick with emotion, you deliver a short, powerful address. You speak of your gratitude for the support of the country. You commend your army to their care. And then you perform the act that will define your legacy. Having now finished the work assigned me, you declare, "I retire from the great theater of action, and bidding an affectionate farewell to this august body under whose orders I have so long acted, I here offer my commission, and take my leave of all the employments of public life." You draw the parchment commission from your coat, the very document that gave you command 8 long years ago, and hand it over. You have laid down the sword. You bow to the stunned congressman, turn, and walk out of the room, a private citizen. You have established, in one profound gesture, the fundamental American principle that the military serves the people, not the other way around. Your greatest victory was not in winning the war, but in the manner in which you left it. You have done the impossible. You have led a revolution, won a war against the most powerful nation on earth. And then, in an act that cemented your legend, you walked away. You are home. You arrive at Mount Vernon on Christmas Eve, 1783, 8 long years after you left. The gentle rhythm of the estate, a rhythm you thought you might never know again, embraces you. You are finally back in your own world, under your own roof, ready to live out your days as a simple farmer. Your idea of a relaxing retirement, of course, involves waking up before dawn, riding for miles to inspect every field and fence line, and endlessly experimenting with crop rotation. Your version of taking it easy would likely exhaust a man half your age, but it is the life you have craved. The world, however, will not leave you alone. You are no longer just a Virginian planter. You are an international icon, the modern Cincinnatus. A constant stream of guests flows through Mount Vernon's doors. Old comrades from the army, politicians seeking advice, artists from Europe wanting to capture your likeness, and ordinary citizens simply hoping to catch a glimpse of the great man. Your correspondence is a daily avalanche of letters from around the world. You are gracious, but the constant attention is draining. You find your true solace in the land itself, in the methodical work of agriculture, in trying to coax prosperity from the familiar Virginian soil. But as you try to focus on your fields, you cannot ignore the troubling news trickling in from the rest of the country. The nation you fought to create seems to be crumbling. The United States is being governed, or rather, not governed by the Articles of Confederation. This framework, created in the midst of war, established a weak central government that was little more than a league of friendship between 13 sovereign states. It's less a government and more a polite suggestion box that the states are free to ignore. The Confederation Congress has no power to tax, no power to regulate commerce between the states, and no power to enforce its own laws. The whole system has the structural integrity of a wet paper bag. The consequences are disastrous. The economy is in ruins. States print their own worthless paper money. They erect trade barriers against each other, waging petty economic wars. In Europe, the great powers treat the new nation with contempt. Britain refuses to abandon its forts in the Northwest, and Spain closes the Mississippi River to American trade. The army you fought so hard to build has been disbanded, and the country is defenseless. You watch from your peaceful sanctuary at Mount Vernon with a growing sense of dread and alarm. You write letters to your former comrades and colleagues, your words filled with foreboding. I am mortified beyond expression. You confess to a friend, speaking of the nation's weakness. All the sacrifice, all the bloodshed of the revolution seems to have been for nothing. Then, in the winter of 1786, the crisis reaches a boiling point. In western Massachusetts, thousands of indebted farmers, many of them Revolutionary War veterans who haven't been paid, rise up in armed rebellion. Led by a former captain named Daniel Shays, they shut down courthouses to prevent foreclosures on their farms. This is Shays' rebellion. It is a desperate cry from men who feel betrayed by the country they helped create. The national government is powerless to intervene. It takes a hastily raised private militia funded by wealthy Boston merchants to finally put the rebellion down. The news of Shays' rebellion terrifies you. It is the confirmation of your worst fears. The Republic is sliding into anarchy and mob rule. What a triumph for our enemies, you write, to find that we are incapable of governing ourselves. The rebellion acts as a catalyst, shocking the propertied classes and political leaders across the country into action. It becomes clear to all that the Articles of Confederation are not just weak, they are a failure. A convention had already been called to meet in Annapolis to discuss trade issues, but it was poorly attended. Now, its leaders, like your brilliant young Virginia protege James Madison and New York's Alexander Hamilton, issue a call for a new, more ambitious convention. It is to meet in Philadelphia in May of 1787 with the stated purpose of revising the Articles. You are, of course, chosen to be a delegate from Virginia. But you are deeply reluctant to go. You are 55 years old. Your health is not what it once was. You have staked your entire reputation on your solemn retirement from public life. To return now might look like the very ambition you so publicly renounced. But the letters pour in. Madison, Henry Knox, and others implore you. They argue that your presence, and yours alone, will give the convention the legitimacy it needs to succeed. If you are not there, they warn, the entire enterprise is doomed to fail. With a heavy heart, you realize they are right. Your duty is not yet done. You agree to go. You arrive in Philadelphia in May 1787. The city greets you as a hero. On the first day of the convention, you are unanimously elected its president. Your role is not to be an active debater, but a presiding officer. You sit in a high-backed chair on a raised dais, a silent, imposing figure, lending your immense prestige and gravitas to the proceedings. Your presence itself is an exhortation to seriousness and purpose. The first thing the delegates do is vote for absolute secrecy. Guards are posted at the doors, and the windows of the State House are nailed shut, trapping the stale, humid air of the Philadelphia summer inside. For 4 months, in that sweltering room, some of the most brilliant minds in America argue, debate, and compromise. The room smells like 55 brilliant, sweaty men in wool suits arguing about the nature of man and government. It is the price of forging a nation, and that price is apparently a complete lack of fresh air. They quickly abandon the idea of merely revising the articles. Instead, led by Madison, they set about creating an entirely new form of government from scratch. You listen from your chair as the great debates rage. Large states versus small states, the power of the presidency, the nature of the judiciary, and, most contentiously, the issue of slavery, which is woven into the fabric of the nation's economy and society. Painful, morally fraught compromises are made to keep the southern states in the new Union. There is a significant historical discussion about whether the Constitution that emerged was a democratic leap forward for liberty or a conservative counter-revolution designed to protect the interests of the wealthy elite and curb the power of the masses. In truth, it was a complex mixture of both, a bundle of compromises designed for a deeply imperfect world. Through it all, you preside with a firm, steady hand. Your silent authority keeps the often fiery debates from spiraling out of control. Finally, in September, a document is ready. A new constitution, creating a federal government with a powerful executive, a bicameral legislature, and an independent judiciary. It is a radical departure, a bold new experiment in self-government. As the last delegates step forward to sign the document, the aged Benjamin Franklin points to the chair in which you have been sitting all summer. Carved into its back is a stylized sun. Franklin remarks that artists often find it difficult to distinguish a rising sun from a setting one. But now at length, he says, looking at the newly signed Constitution and at you, I have the happiness to know that it is a rising and not a setting sun. The forging is complete. Now comes the even harder task of getting the nation to accept it. The document is signed. The sun, as Franklin hopes, is rising. But it is rising on a divided country. The new Constitution is merely a proposal, a radical and controversial one. It must now be sent to the states for ratification, and its success is far from guaranteed. You return to Mount Vernon while the battle over your convention's work rages across the 13 states. The nation splits into two camps: the Federalists, who champion the new, strong central government, and the Anti-Federalists, who fear it as a monstrous creation that will swallow state sovereignty and trample on individual liberties. You take no public part in the ferocious debates, but your support is the new charter's greatest asset. Everyone knows you presided over its creation and approve of the final result. Your silent endorsement is more powerful than 1,000 fiery speeches. After a long and bitter struggle, and with the crucial promise that a Bill of Rights will be added as the first amendments, the Constitution is ratified. The United States of America has a new government, and that new government needs a leader. There is no doubt in anyone's mind who that leader must be. In the winter of 1789, the first presidential election is held. The electors cast their ballots, and the result is something that has never happened before and will never happen again in American history. The vote is unanimous. You are the only person the entire country, in all its fractious diversity, can agree upon. It's deeply flattering, of course, but it also feels a bit like being the only person willing to volunteer for the most difficult, uncertain, and thankless job imaginable. You compare your feelings on accepting the presidency to those of a culprit who is going to the place of his execution. You have no wish to leave the peace of Mount Vernon, but the call of duty is absolute. The country, once again, needs you. Your journey from Virginia to the temporary capital in New York City is a slow, triumphant procession. In every town and village, cheering crowds, ringing church bells, and booming cannon salutes greet you. Young girls in white dresses throw flowers in your path. It is the adulation due a king, and it makes you deeply uncomfortable. You are not a king. You are to be the chief executive of a republic, and no one, including you, is entirely sure what that means. There is no instruction manual for this new office. You will have to write it as you go. On April 30th, 1789, you stand on the second-floor balcony of Federal Hall on Wall Street. Before a massive, hushed crowd, you place your hand on a Bible and recite the oath of office, adding the words, "So help me God." You are now President of the United States. The responsibility is a physical weight, heavier than any you have borne before. Everything you do, every decision you make, will set a precedent for generations of future presidents. How you dress, how you speak, how you sign a bill, how you entertain guests if you sneeze. Someone will likely write it down as the official presidential sneeze and argue about its constitutional implications. The pressure to not make a misstep is immense. Your first and most monumental task is to build a government from nothing. The Constitution provides a blueprint, but you must create the actual machinery. You oversee the passage of the Judiciary Act, which establishes the Supreme Court and the entire federal court system. You begin the process of creating the executive departments, War, Treasury, and State. To lead them, you assemble a cabinet of what you consider the best minds in the nation, a team of rivals whose brilliance is matched only by their profound opposition to one another. For Secretary of War, you have your steady old comrade, Henry Knox. For Secretary of State, you bring home the brilliant diplomat and writer Thomas Jefferson from his post in France. And for the crucial role of Secretary of the Treasury, you choose your former aide-de-camp, the ferociously intelligent and ambitious Alexander Hamilton. Putting Jefferson and Hamilton in the same room is like locking a lion and a tiger in a small cage and expecting them to collaborate on a vegan cookbook. their personalities, and, more importantly, their fundamental visions for America are completely, spectacularly, and irreconcilably different. Hamilton, the city dweller born in the West Indies, envisions a powerful, centralized nation with a robust industrial economy, a strong national bank, and a permanent national debt to bind the wealthy to the government's success. Jefferson, the Virginia planter and slaveholder, dreams of a decentralized agrarian republic of small, independent yeoman farmers, a government that is small, frugal, and unobtrusive. Their constant, bitter clashes over policy will dominate your presidency and give birth to the nation's first political parties, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. You strive to remain above the fray, a unifying symbol for all Americans. The degree to which you truly stood above this factional fighting, or were, in fact, a quiet but firm Federalist in your own right, is a subject of ongoing academic interpretation. You detest the very idea of political parties, seeing them as a mortal threat to the Republic. Yet, in the great debates of your first term, you find yourself consistently siding with Hamilton's pragmatic, and often controversial, arguments for a strong and energetic federal government. The most pressing issue is the nation's catastrophic financial state. On this, you give Hamilton free rein. He proposes a bold and deeply controversial plan. First, the federal government will assume all the war debts of the individual states, consolidating them into a single national debt. This, he argues, will bind the states more tightly to the new government. Second, he calls for the creation of a powerful Bank of the United States to manage the nation's finances. Jefferson and his allies are horrified. They see it as a dangerous consolidation of power in the hands of northern bankers and speculators. And they argue that the Constitution gives the federal government no specific power to create a bank. The debate rages, threatening to tear your new government apart before it has even learned to walk. The deadlock is finally broken by a now famous compromise. Over a private dinner, Jefferson agrees to persuade his Southern allies to support Hamilton's financial plan. In exchange, Hamilton agrees to use his influence to ensure that the permanent capital of the United States will be located in the South, on a patch of land carved from Virginia and Maryland on the banks of the Potomac River, a site you yourself will help to choose. Amidst these grand policy battles, you are also defining the character of the presidency itself. You work to strike a balance between dignity and accessibility. You hold formal weekly receptions, called levees, where you bow politely to guests but do not shake hands, a practice some criticize as too aloof and kingly. You embark on long tours of the country, first through New England and later through the South, traveling by horse-drawn carriage on rough roads to see the country for yourself and, more importantly, to allow the country to see its president, to foster a sense of national identity. You are no longer just a general or a planter. You are the living embodiment of the United States, and you are building the authority and the traditions of your office, one careful, deliberate step at a time. As your first term draws to a close, your mind is set. You have done your duty. You have breathed life into the paper framework of the Constitution, established a functioning government, and set the nation on a stable financial footing. You are exhausted by the endless political battles, the constant public scrutiny, and the bitter feud between your two-star cabinet members. You long for the quiet fields of Mount Vernon. You inform your closest confidants, including James Madison and your cabinet, of your firm decision to retire. But the nation is not ready to let you go. In a rare moment of perfect agreement, Hamilton and Jefferson both implore you to stay. They argue that the partisan divides are growing deeper. The international situation is becoming more perilous, and you are the only figure in the country who commands enough respect to hold the fragile union together. They warn that your departure would be a disaster. It's like your friends desperately convincing you to stay for one more drink at a party that has already gone on far too long and is showing all the signs of getting very, very weird. With an almost palpable sense of resignation, you once again sacrifice your personal desire for the public good. You agree to serve a second term. If your first term was about building a nation, your second is about trying to keep it from being torn apart by forces both foreign and domestic. The French Revolution, which most Americans initially celebrated as a sister revolution, has taken a dark and bloody turn. The reign of terror has begun, and France has declared war on Great Britain. This places the United States in an impossible position. The 1778 Treaty of Alliance, signed during our own revolution, seems to obligate you to come to France's aid. Your heart may be with France, the nation that helped secure your own liberty. But your head knows that the young, weak United States is in no position to fight a war with the naval superpower of Great Britain, your largest trading partner. The country is bitterly divided. Jefferson and his followers, the Democratic Republicans, are passionately pro-French. Hamilton and his Federalists are pragmatically pro-British, or at the very least, pro-neutrality. The debate is not polite or academic. It is fought in angry newspaper editorials and furious street demonstrations. In April of 1793, you make one of the most consequential decisions of your presidency. You issue the Proclamation of Neutrality, declaring that the United States will be friendly and impartial toward both belligerent powers. It is a declaration of American independence from the perpetual conflicts of Europe. Jefferson sees it as a betrayal of France. Hamilton sees it as essential for national survival. You see it as the only sane choice. Your policy of neutrality is immediately put to the test by the arrival of the new French ambassador, Edmond Charles Genet, or Citizen Genet. He lands not in the capital, but in Charleston, and behaves less like a diplomat and more like a rowdy exchange student who has decided to throw a massive party in your house without asking for permission first. He immediately begins commissioning American privateers to attack British ships and tries to raise a militia to attack Spanish territory, all in blatant violation of your neutrality proclamation. He openly appeals to the American people over the head of their own president. His arrogance is so astounding that he even alienates his biggest supporter, Thomas Jefferson. You are forced to demand that the French government recall him, a firm assertion of American sovereignty. The crisis with Britain is even more dangerous. The Royal Navy begins seizing hundreds of American merchant ships trading with France and impressing their sailors, forcing them into service in the British Navy. Cries for war with Britain echo through the land. Just how close the United States came to another war with Britain during this period is a point of intense scholarly examination. To avert a conflict you know America cannot win, you send Chief Justice John Jay to London to negotiate a treaty. The resulting Jay Treaty of 1794 is a bitter pill to swallow. Jay secures the evacuation of the British forts in the Northwest, but he makes major concessions on trade and fails to stop the impressment of sailors. When the terms of the treaty become public, a firestorm of protest erupts. You are vilified in the press in a way you have never experienced before. You are called a traitor, a secret monarchist, a sellout to the British. Mobs burn John Jay in effigy. Despite the intense public pressure, you sign the treaty. You believe it is a flawed agreement, but the only alternative is a catastrophic war. It is an act of immense political courage, choosing an unpopular peace over a popular but ruinous war. At the same time, you are battling these international crises. A domestic rebellion flares up. Hamilton's financial plan had included a federal tax on distilled spirits. For farmers on the western frontier of Pennsylvania, this is not a luxury tax. They are too far from markets to transport their bulky grain for sale. So they distill it into whiskey, which is easier to transport and often used as a form of currency. The tax, they feel, unfairly targets them. They refuse to pay it, harassing and tarring and feathering federal tax collectors in what becomes known as the Whiskey Rebellion. Here, you see a direct challenge to the authority of the federal government you have worked so hard to build. This is not Shays' Rebellion, where the government was powerless. This is a test. You respond with overwhelming force. You call up a militia army of nearly 13,000 men, larger than the army you commanded for much of the Revolution, and in a move that stuns the nation, you put on your old military uniform and ride out at the head of the army yourself. The rebels, hearing that this massive force is marching west, led by George Washington himself, mostly just evaporate and go home. It is the most polite, anticlimactic insurrection in history. 2 of its leaders are convicted of treason, but you later pardon them. You have proven your point without bloodshed. The federal government will enforce its laws. As the end of your second term approaches, you are weary to your very bones. The partisan attacks have been relentless and deeply personal, and they have wounded you. You are more determined than ever to retire. This time, there will be no changing your mind. You decide not to give a final speech, but to publish a letter to the American people, a final message of advice from their departing father. With Alexander Hamilton's significant help in drafting, you prepare your farewell address. It is your political last will and testament. In it, you plead with your countrymen to cherish the Union above all else. You issue your most famous and urgent warnings. You caution them against the baneful effects of the spirit of party, arguing that hyper-partisanship will only lead to distraction, division, and ultimately, despotism. And in foreign policy, you urge them to maintain neutrality, to avoid permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world, and to pursue a course guided only by American interests. It is the distilled wisdom of a lifetime of service, a parting warning from a man who has seen his country through its birth, its near death, and its fragile first steps. Having offered your final counsel, you are finally, truly, ready to go home. In the spring of 1797, you are finally, truly, a private citizen. You hand the reins of government to your successor, John Adams, and make the familiar journey south from Philadelphia to Mount Vernon. This time, there is no sense of foreboding, no feeling of a temporary reprieve. This is the end of your public life. You are home for good. The only foreign entanglement you have to worry about now is a potential dispute with your neighbor over a wandering fence line. It is a profound and welcome relief. The world you return to is both the same and completely different. The Potomac still flows at the edge of your lawn. The boxwood hedges still release their sharp, clean scent after a rain. But you are not the same man who left. You are 65 years old, your body showing the wear of decades of service. Yet, you dive back into the management of Mount Vernon with the boundless energy of a man half your age. You wake before sunrise, ride out for hours to inspect your 5 farms, and fill your days with the endless, meticulous work of an innovative agriculturist. You write incredibly detailed, 16-page letters to your farm manager about the proper method for planting clover or the precise design for a new type of plow. Your employees must feel like they're getting agricultural advice from a very famous, very intense, and very retired drill sergeant. You are a businessman, constantly adapting. You have long since abandoned tobacco as your primary crop, recognizing it as a destructive force that drains the soil of its nutrients. You have become a wheat farmer, building a state-of-the-art grist mill that produces high-quality flour for export. In your final years, you even operate one of the largest and most successful whiskey distilleries in the entire country. You are always looking forward, always experimenting, always trying to build and improve. But as you survey your thriving estate, you are confronted daily by the great, unresolved contradiction of your life and of the nation you helped create. Mount Vernon is not just a home and a farm. It is a plantation. Its prosperity, its very existence, is built upon the labor of more than 300 enslaved people. This is the central, uncomfortable truth that shadows your twilight years. These are not abstract figures in a ledger. They are the men, women, and children who serve your food, mend your clothes, and toil in your fields. They are a constant presence, their lives inextricably and unequally bound to yours. The evolution of your views on this institution is a subject of intense and nuanced historical study. In your youth, you were an unthinking participant in the system, a typical Virginia planter who bought and sold human beings to expand your estate. But the Revolution, with its soaring rhetoric of liberty and inalienable rights, planted a seed of moral unease. How can you fight for your own freedom while holding others in bondage? The question hangs in the air, unanswered. Throughout the war, and especially during your presidency, you grow increasingly private in your condemnation of slavery, calling it your life's only unavoidable subject of regret. You see it not only as a moral evil, but as an economic and political poison. You worry that it will one day tear the nation apart. Yet, you are trapped. You are a public man, but you make no major public gesture against the institution during your lifetime, fearing it would fracture the fragile union. And you are trapped in a personal sense as well. Many of the enslaved people at Mount Vernon are dour slaves, part of the estate of Martha's first husband. Under the laws of the time, you have no legal right to free them. They belong to her and, upon her death, will be inherited by her grandchildren. Freeing only the people you personally own would mean tearing husbands from wives and children from parents, a cruelty you are unwilling to inflict. And so, you live with the contradiction. You are known as a firm but fair master, discouraging brutal punishments and trying to keep families together. But you are still a master. You still profit from their forced labor. The quiet evenings in your study, surrounded by books on philosophy and freedom, are spent reviewing farm reports that list human beings alongside livestock and bushels of wheat. The dissonance is a quiet, persistent hum beneath the surface of your retirement. Just when you believe you are finally free of public duty, the nation calls one last time. In 1798, relations with revolutionary France have deteriorated into an undeclared naval conflict known as the Quasi-War. A French invasion seems like a real possibility. President Adams asks you to come out of retirement and accept command of the American Army. You reluctantly agree, but on two conditions: that you will not have to take active field command unless an actual invasion occurs, and that Alexander Hamilton will be your second in command, handling all the administrative details. It's the ultimate senior management position. You get the title and provide the unifying prestige, but the day-to-day work is somebody else's problem. Thankfully, the crisis passes, and you are never required to leave Mount Vernon. It is in these final years that you turn your mind to your legacy and to the one great issue you have left unresolved. In the summer of 1799, you sit at your desk and, in your own hand, you draft your last will and testament. It is here that you will make your final, most personal statement on slavery. In the document, you make a provision that is unprecedented among the slave-holding founding fathers. You decree that all of the enslaved people that you personally own, 123 men, women, and children, are to be set free. The act is both momentous and complicated. Their freedom is not to be immediate, but is to take effect upon the death of your wife, Martha. This is to avoid the anguish of separating the families intertwined with the dour slaves whom you cannot legally emancipate. Your will goes further. You provide that the elderly and the infirm among them are to be clothed and fed by your estate for the rest of their lives. You decree that the children are to be taught to read and write, and are to be trained in a useful occupation, so that they can support themselves as free citizens. It is an act of careful, deliberate, and profound conscience. It is an admission that the ideals of the revolution must, in the end, apply to all. It is not a perfect solution. It is a delayed freedom, but it is a decisive moral act that sets you apart, a final attempt to square your life's actions with the principles you fought to establish. The sun is indeed setting over the Potomac, and you have done what you can to prepare your own house and the nation for the morning. The turn of the century is approaching. The year is 1799. You are 67 years old, and the rhythms of your life at Mount Vernon have become a source of deep, quiet contentment. The great storms of your life, the wars, the political battles, the burdens of command have passed. Now, there is only the gentle turning of the seasons, the satisfaction of a well-run farm, and the quiet company of your family, and the steady stream of visitors who still make the pilgrimage to your door. You are, at last, at peace. On a cold, bleak day in the middle of December, you set out on horseback, as you do every day, to make your 5-hour inspection of the farms. The weather is foul, a miserable mix of snow, sleet, and freezing rain begins to fall. But you are a man accustomed to hardship and weather. You press on, completing your rounds, your greatcoat soaked through. When you return to the main house, dinner is ready, and you are insistent that your schedule not be disrupted. You sit down to eat in your damp clothes, ignoring the concerns of your secretary. It is a small thing, a minor stubbornness, but it will be the decision that unravels everything. You wake the next morning with a sore throat. By the afternoon, it has worsened, and you are becoming hoarse. Still, you go out in the evening to mark some trees for cutting. The cold, damp air seeps deeper into your system. That night, you wake your wife. Martha, struggling to breathe. The illness has taken hold with terrifying speed. The household is thrown into a state of quiet panic. Your secretary and your farm manager are summoned. The doctors are sent for. But in the rural world of the 18th century, help is hours away. By the time the doctors arrive, you are in severe distress. Your throat is so swollen you can barely speak or swallow. They diagnose you with inflammatory quinsy, what modern doctors believe was likely acute epiglottitis, a severe swelling of the tissue at the back of the throat that closes off the airway. The doctors, working by the flickering candlelight in the chilled bedchamber, proceed with the best medical knowledge they have, and that knowledge is, by modern standards, tragically misguided. Their primary treatment involves bleeding you, repeatedly. It is the 18th century medical equivalent of trying to fix a leaky engine by draining all the oil. Their intentions are pure, their methods less so. They apply blistering agents to your throat and have you inhale vinegar steam, all to no avail. Through it all, you are a model of stoic composure. You are fully aware of your own impending death. You check your own pulse. You give your final instructions to your secretary, telling him where to find your will. You turn to Martha, who has been sitting at the foot of your bed for hours, and you comfort her. As the evening wears on, you thank the doctors for their efforts and tell them they need not trouble themselves anymore. I die hard, you whisper, your breath ragged, but I am not afraid to go. Sometime after 10 o'clock on the night of December 14th, 1799, you check your own pulse one last time. Your hand falls from your wrist. You are still. Your last words are reported to have been, simply, "'Tis well." It is a testament to your entire character, calm, composed, and to the point, even at the absolute end. You were never a man for excessive theatrics. The news of your death travels across the country, and a wave of profound, genuine grief sweeps the nation. In a world without modern media, the news moves at the speed of a horse, but it strikes every community with the force of a physical blow. The man who had been the nation's single constant, the general, the president, the father of his country, is gone. In his eulogy before Congress, your old cavalry commander, Henry, Light Horse Harry Lee, delivers the immortal line that will forever define you, first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. And then, the myth-making begins. After your death, the myth-making machine goes into overdrive. Parson Weems publishes his famous hagiography and invents the story about the cherry tree, a fable designed to teach children about honesty. Your image is captured in paintings and statues, not as a man of flesh and blood, but as a marble Roman god, perfect, stoic, and unblemished. You become less a person and more a monument. It is a shame, in a way. The real man, with all his fiery temper, his steely ambition, his quiet insecurities about his education, and his deep, human complexities, is infinitely more fascinating than the cold, perfect stone. And so we are left with the question that echoes through the centuries: how should we remember you? How do we hold the whole of your life in our minds at once? For you are not one man, but two. There is the indispensable founder, the man without whom the American experiment may very well have failed, the general who held a ragged army together through sheer force of will, the president who gave the new republic legitimacy and steered it through the treacherous waters of its infancy. the Cincinnatus who laid down ultimate power, setting a standard for the entire world. And then there is the other man, the ambitious Virginia planter, the tough frontier soldier, the lifelong, unrepentant slaveholder who lived a life of leisure and privilege built on the forced labor of hundreds of other human beings, the man who, despite his private misgivings, profited from the peculiar institution his entire life. How we should remember Washington, the indispensable founder or the compromised slaveholder, is perhaps the most vital and ongoing conversation in American history. To dismiss him because of his flaws is to ignore his monumental, nation-shaping achievements. But to ignore his flaws is to engage in the same sterile myth-making that your own generation began. Perhaps the only way is to see the man whole, to acknowledge the contradictions not as an excuse, but as the central, challenging lesson of your life. You were a man of your time who was also, in crucial moments, able to transcend it. You were an imperfect man who was, in the end, entrusted with the fate of a nation founded on a promise of perfection, a promise of equality that it has been struggling to live up to ever since. Your story is not one of a marble statue, but of a human being, grappling with the great questions of power, duty, liberty, and the deep, tangled roots of a nation's original sin. And in that grappling, in that struggle, lies the real, enduring, and deeply human legacy. Now, the fire in the hearth is burning low, casting long, soft shadows across the room. The story is at its end. The journey from the damp soil of a Virginian boyhood through the smoke of battle and the halls of power has led us here, to this quiet moment of reflection. The great, thundering events of history have faded back into the pages of books, leaving only a gentle echo, a whisper in the quiet of the night. The man, George Washington, has returned to the earth of his beloved Mount Vernon, and the monument that is his legacy now belongs to the ages, to be debated and considered and reevaluated by each new generation that finds itself living in the house he helped to build. Let the weight of these thoughts begin to lighten now. Allow the details to soften, the sharp edges of history to blur into a gentle landscape of memory. The sound of cannons fades, replaced by the soft hum of the world outside your window. The face of the general, the president, the farmer, all dissolve into the simple, calming darkness. There is nothing more to learn tonight, nothing more to analyze. The journey is complete. All that is left is to let the current of the story carry you gently away, drifting from the shores of the past toward the quiet harbor of your own dreams. Feel the gentle pull of sleep, a soft tide drawing you out into a peaceful, silent sea. The night is deep and calm, and all is well.